Okay, we're live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming back on our Friday live coaching. And today we have Angela Choi with us, who is an international life purpose coach and career coach. And I know because during 2020, it's been a strange year, but it was a lot of time for us to reflect on what we've been doing all our lives. And it's such an important time to see what we want to do that's truly aligned with us, right? Because here at Unconventional Asians, we want to help the Asian community cultivate the skills to forge their own path. And to do that, we need to know what is aligned with us and what makes us happy, right? Instead of what society tells us. So
Yeah.
really excited to have you here, Angela. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Clover. Super excited.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, how did you like get to being a coach, and what was your background like, so the audience can get to know you a little bit?
Just to introduce myself, my name is Angela Choi, and I'm an international life purpose and career coach. And what I do is that I help professionals who feel stuck or unfulfilled to discover their purpose so that they can have both the impact and the income that they want,
Mm,
and so that they can create lives that they love, both
mm,
in and outside of work.
mm,
And a lot of what I do stems from my own personal experiences of trying to find my purpose
mhm.
throughout the last 10 years,
Wow.
trying different things. Yeah, in the corporate world, in the startup world, in the nonprofit world. And I did this in the US, Asia, Africa, Europe.
Wow.
And while all of this was happening, I was dealing a lot with self judgment, familial pressure, as I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, and societal expectations, like you talked about, the markers of success, right? And with all of these experiences and the lessons that I've learned along the way, now I found that like it's my purpose to help other people who are facing similar challenges, to help them find their purpose so that they can create lives that they love. Because when we're all living a little more authentically, a little more courageously, the world is just a better place. So that's where I come from.
Oh, amazing. I love that. Wow. It's so cool that you actually worked in so many countries. So what are some of the jobs that you've done in the
Yeah,
past?
so I've had your standard 9 to 5 jobs. I
Mhm.
started out in consulting,
Okay.
working for banks,
Yeah.
and I quickly realized that that wasn't for me.
Mm,
Um, and in between jobs, I've taken different sabbaticals to try different things.
okay.
So one of the things I did was I worked as a writer and photographer on a cruise
Wow.
ship. Yeah.
That sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I also learned that I glamorize cruise ship life, which I could, dovetail into a whole separate conversation of what
Okay.
that's actually like.
Okay.
So I did that. Another thing I did on my sabbatical was I represented the US at the World's Fair in Italy a couple of years
Wow.
ago. That was really fun, just representing the pavilion and what America's doing in terms of food insecurity, and
Mm.
being able to lead tours for VIP visitors
Oh,
from all around the world. It was quite
oh,
amazing. Yeah.
wow. That's exciting. Wow, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
cool. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, about the familial pressure, because like I
Mm.
know, like in the Asian community, sometimes we're pushed to, to be in the STEM field, like to be accountant, doctor, engineer, lawyer, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
did your parents give you that pressure at all?
So I don't feel like my parents gave me pressure to be in the STEM field per se, but I do feel like they felt like because I went to a good school that I should be
Mm,
making good money, like that the
right,
purpose of going to a good school is to
right,
make
right,
good
right.
money. And early on, so when I was in college, I was deciding what to major in, and I was telling my parents, I'm thinking of being an econ major, because I went to a liberal arts school, so that's the closest
Mm,
thing to business,
right.
or being a psychology major. And they were like, why is that even a question, like, of course you would go for econ, right? So
Mhm.
there was this push to make money. That's where the
Mm.
pressure came from. And I think when you think about it, when Asian parents, encourage their children to go into STEM or be a lawyer or doctor, it's, well, one, for the prestige, and two, for the money.
Yeah, the practical reasons. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really. True. Okay. So when you were doing and experimenting with everything that you were doing, did what were their responses like?
So I think it's so funny. I think they were like, why can't she keep a job? Why does she keep jumping around? Where is she now? My dad thought that I was being a beach bum because at one point I had quit my job and I basically spent a year going to different places, trying different things. So
Oh, I love
he just
that.
like lost track of where I was,
Right.
and he didn't know what I was doing. And he thought that I was being lazy. Like, he actually thought I was a beach bum.
Mm,
He thought that I was just traveling, like laying on beaches, right? Which there's actually nothing
mm,
wrong with that. Like,
nope,
if that makes you happy and you have the money to do it, then I feel like go do it. Do what makes you happy, right?
yeah.
But that's a whole separate conversation. So he thought I was being lazy. He thought that, okay, back to the money thing.
Yeah.
He thought that I was wasting my potential. And the
Mhm.
way that he framed it was like, you're in your prime earning years. How could you not be working right now? How could you leave a corporate job? Like, you make so much money and now you're not doing anything. Like, in his head, I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
And I think my mom felt that way, but to a lesser extent. And
Mhm.
at one point during my year off, I had gone to Zimbabwe, and at that point, she really didn't want me to go. But there was also this feeling of like, you're an adult, and I can tell you what I think is best for you, but like ultimately, you're going to make the decision. So if you
Yeah.
are going to go, just be safe about it. And I think there was more reasoning with her, but I think in the beginning there was this feeling of like, okay, you left your job and now what are you going to do? Oh, okay.
Mm,
Where are you now? What are you doing? Don't you want to make money? For my mom, it's more
mm.
like, oh, and this is where like I get bothered in other ways, but she's always like, it'd be so much easier if you just got married and had
Oh
someone
God. Yeah.
support
Here's
you. And
another.
I'm like,
Yep.
I
Another
can
path.
support myself. Yeah. Why do
There
I
you
need
go.
someone to support
Right.
me?
Right. It was just the really traditional narratives of needing, a stable job, needing to be married and have kids and have 2.5 kids to be
Yeah.
exact.
White picket
White
fence.
picket fence, all of that stuff, right? The American dream. But I think times have changed, but not a lot of people, or especially our Asian parent generation, have updated the thinking yet. So I right now
Yeah.
we're kind of stuck in this in between stage of like, okay, modern times are different, but then we have to live, in this new world and going with the times, but then being stuck at home and being bombarded with these traditional messages can be really difficult. So
Yeah.
that's why we're so grateful to have people like you who can guide us out of it and own
Yeah.
our authentic truth.
There's definitely something, I mean, that I want to share, based on my own personal experiences of going
Hmm.
through this. I've been, I thought about this a lot because
Yeah.
what ended up happening was, especially like with my dad, because of everything that he was telling me, like
Hmm.
I took a lot of his projections and basically internalized it, right, on top of just like comparing myself to like other people my age who have settled down, right, who have purchased property, right. So I actually internalized a lot of that. And there was this feeling of like, my dad doesn't understand me, and at the same time, like, I've taken what he said, like, inside of me. And and then from like this questioning of like, why doesn't he understand where I'm coming from? Like, I've tried to talk to him about this, like, doesn't it make sense what I'm saying, that like not everything is about money, like it's about doing the things
Mm.
that you enjoy, it's about trying different things. And like I was I felt like I was judging him for not understanding me,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it's not helpful when like he's judging me for not following his path and I'm judging him for not understanding me. So now we're
Mhm.
both coming at it from a place of judgment, right? Like,
Right.
which is not helpful at
Yeah.
all, right? Like, you
Mhm.
want to come together, at least be on the same page and like hear the other side out,
Yes.
right? So there are moments where like I've taken a step back and it's
Mhm.
like, okay, Angela, like, why don't you look at this from his perspective, right?
Mm.
And I think about how he came to America and it's a country where he didn't speak the language and
Mhm.
how much he, sacrificed coming here and how he didn't have a stable childhood growing up. Like my dad grew up poor. And it's like, can I blame him for wanting stability or can I blame him for thinking that the best thing for me in my life is stability
Mm.
when that's what he knows and
Yeah.
that's, framed by his lived experiences? And when I look at it that way, it's like, then I remove the judgment, right? And then
Mm.
I'm able to come from a place of compassion and instead, and like maybe we're not on different pages, like we're not opposing each other. Like
Mm.
ultimately, like we both want like what is best for me. It's just that the
Yes.
definitions are different.
Yes.
And I think a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's like for him, I think it's like if you have the basic food security, like additional money for property and just like having a stable life, like why would you want more than that? Like, isn't
Mm.
that sufficient, right?
Yeah.
But for me, because I grew up in America, and I mean, I grew up also low income, but like it's very different, like from what he went through in
Mhm.
his time period, right? But because relatively speaking, like I was very fortunate to grow up here, right?
Yeah.
It's like for me, like I can think about something beyond having money or extra money. Like there's that final tier that, I'm striving for. Like,
Self-actualization.
yes, yes. But you can't, how do you describe that to someone who hasn't spent their life thinking about that or didn't have the space to think about that, maybe, or
Yeah.
didn't have the wherewithal or other people surrounding them who thought about that? What if, like, I mean, in his case, like everyone around him, I mean, all the Asian parents, I mean, not all, but a lot of them, think about money, prestige, right?
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I can't blame him. And that's
Mhm.
really helped me shift.
Mm. Thank you for so much for sharing that, to be able to
Yeah.
see a narrative coming from compassion, because it's completely true. We have the luxury and privilege to be contemplating about our life purpose because they have built that foundation for us in the Maslow hierarchy. The needs are survival at the bottom, and now we can thrive, right? Instead of
Yes.
just thinking about our basic needs. So
Yes.
if we didn't have that, if we didn't have that solid foundation that our parents gave us, we won't be here today. So definitely, like, being grateful for what they've given us is important. And there might be a difference, but the point of, I guess, evolving into a next generation is that we want to be better than our previous generation,
Right.
and they have done a good job in that.
Yeah.
But there might
Yeah.
be some struggles here and there. But here, I think, with us kind of questioning the system, questioning ourselves, and being authentically us, we start changing our dance steps almost, and then they will start kind of dancing differently with us. And so
Yes.
we all have to start with ourselves first at the end of the day.
Yeah. And in having these conversations with him, and I think this is the case for a lot of Asian parents, it's just that it comes out in a way, it's like their intentions don't come out in the way that they intend for them to do because of
Mm,
our perceptions of it, right? But like
yes.
the times that I've like actually sat down with my dad to have these conversations with him,
Mm,
it's like it comes from a place of concern. It's like, I
right.
want you to be okay. Like I want you to be financially sound. I want you, if you feel like you're okay, then that's what matters. But it's so hard for
Mm,
him to wrap his head around me being okay when I'm not on the path that he thinks people need to be on to be
yeah.
okay.
Right. Because that's all they know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now we're going to show them another way.
Yes. Yes.
But the only thing is we have to show them first. But when we're
Yes.
doing it, when they don't see results, it's very outcome based, right? Then
Yes.
they're like, I'm freaking out here because you're gonna starve on the street. Where's the security? Where's the
Yes.
stability? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
Totally with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think this is where sometimes I struggle too, with because the programming is so deep with wanting to be secure and stable, which is important, of course, because we do need to survive. It's like, where do I draw the line of kind of like pulling the plug from like the corporate job and actually starting a business, for example, right?
Mhm.
Without like any material, like financial gains at the moment. It's like, what do you do? So that you can make sure you will put food on the table, but actually be happy at the same time. I think that's kind of like where a lot of people are questioning right now. The
Yeah.
practicality and the pursuing your dreams, you're gonna have to balance the two.
Yeah, I hear you, and I have so many thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, the first thought that I want to mention is that this concept and this notion of stability, right?
Mhm.
It's really easy to say like I want stability,
Yeah.
but what does that actually mean, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna use like a personal example. A couple of years ago, when I was thinking of leaving my job, I was very unhappy at work. Like on the outside, it was fine, like stable income, like
Mhm.
like the job wasn't awful. I just wasn't feeling it anymore. And I just felt like it took more energy for me to like go to work than to like do the actual work, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
just didn't feel like I belonged there, or that I wanted to be there, right? Like the
Right.
classic, like, when is 5 o'clock gonna come around? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, can't wait till Friday. And then Sunday
Yeah.
night, you're like, oh man, like another week, right? Like that was
Mhm.
what I was
Mhm.
feeling. And despite having felt this way for a while, like it was really hard for me to reach the point where it's like, I think I need to leave my job, right? And the reason why was because stability. That was in like forefront of my mind. Oh, I'm gonna lose the financial stability of not having a full-time job. Oh, I'm gonna lose the stability that comes with having a job title, especially living in a place like New York City where you meet someone and it's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, how do I validate my
Mhm.
existence or who I am if I don't
Mhm.
have some job title, right? So like that was what I was thinking of. But I was speaking to a friend about it, and it's like it dawned on me that like even if I have these external markers of stability, like how stable am I internally and mentally if like I am
Mhm.
not enjoying my job or where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
stability is built on a very unstable foundation of
Mm.
misery and discontent. Like, is that actually
Mm.
stability?
Oh, I love that reframe. Interesting. Yeah, and if, especially if we look at our internal world to reflect on the outer world. So if the inner world is not stable, then eventually the external world will crumble.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yes.
that.
So we
Mm.
we talk about stability a lot, but like what does stability actually mean? What does
Mm.
stability actually feel like? So like that's one way of looking at it, right? Of course, like I also recognize that yes, like we need to put food on the table. We need to make sure we have places to live. So like I'm not gonna go and encourage everyone, oh, if you hate your job, just go quit your job and like you don't have to think about the the consequences. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like if like people really feel like this isn't working, then obviously there are also logistical steps to take, right? It's like
Mhm,
how
mhm.
much money, like what is the actual monetary amount, right, that you
Right.
need to feel secure or stable? What does secure and stable mean to you, right? So like
Mhm.
actually taking steps to define that and
Right.
creating a safety net if you need that to feel
Mhm,
stable or secure, right?
mhm,
So that's the other thing I want to say. And
mm,
then the third thing that I want to say is that, and I guess this is like the more like spiritual and holistic side of looking at things,
mhm,
it's that we can't take anything with us when we leave this world.
mhm,
And I feel like when I remind myself of that, like the stuff that we're chasing doesn't really matter, right? Like what matters is that we're happy in what we're doing. Because I think that, and I've definitely fallen into this trap of like, if I just get that, if I reach that point, if I make that much money, if I have that thing, I'll be happy. And you get there and you ride this temporary high and then you come back to baseline, right? So it's like, it's not the thing that really matters. It's like the journey of getting there that
Yeah,
matters, or like who
yeah.
you become in the process, right?
Mhm.
Because like at the end of the line, we want to be remembered for who we are, who we were to other people, right? Like the money, the house, that stuff, like you can't
Doesn't
take it
matter.
with you. But I mean, the flip side, again, like also hyper aware that we all have different values. It's different if like someone came to me and said, one of my values is legacy, right? For
Mm,
example. And my legacy is that I want to be able to leave something tangible for my children or the future
mm,
generation, right? Then that's something different. So it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's really important to evaluate for yourself, like what is important to you, what your values are, right? And for me, like that's the like type of internal conversation that I've had with myself about like what does stability mean? What does this
mm,
mean for me now? What does it mean in terms of like what I'm doing,
mhm.
and the things that matter and actually don't matter?
Right. I love that. So that's like kind of the first step is awareness, but in to dismantle what your values, well, I can dismantle and question what those values you hold dear are even mean. So for
Yes,
example, if you value stability, where does that definition come from? Right?
yes,
And it's like questioning yourself further and further and further and
yes,
break it down to eventually figure out what your core values are, what you
yes,
actually want instead of what
yes,
the programming in the society is telling you want. Because a lot of
yes,
times we just pick that up from our parents or from our peers because we want to
correct.
keep up with the Jonases or whatever it is, right?
Yes,
But maybe
correct.
at the end of the day, we want love and understanding and attention and all of that, which has nothing to do with the external stuff that we seem like we're chasing.
100%. I
Mm,
mean, again, if we boil things down, I think that ultimately, like, you and I and everyone else, we're not so different. Like, I
yeah.
think if we really boiled it down, there are two things that people really want, right?
Mhm,
It's happiness
mhm.
or contentment, how you define that, and love.
Yeah, that's it.
But
It's
we've been
actually that's
conditioned
simple.
to think that like success will lead to happiness or money will lead to happiness. And
Yeah,
but underneath that, it's just happening. Why do we do things? We do things because we think it's going to bring us joy. Otherwise, why would you do something? Like, why
right.
do people work? They work so that they can make money, so that they can use the money to have the experiences
Mhm,
that they want because the experiences will make them happy.
mhm, mhm.
I just dropped something.
Oh, no worries, you got it. Amazing. Great. Perfect. Yeah. So, right now you live in New York City.
Yeah,
After
so
all those traveling, you have settled in New York City.
in and out of New York, I've been trying to be very mindful of where I can situate myself with
Yeah.
COVID. So I've been in and out of New York, and currently I'm in New York. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Would you say because right now your work is mostly online, or
Mhm.
right? And so would
Yes.
you go, kind of move around after when the world opens up?
Yes, I am planning to move around, and I've
Yeah.
kind of been moving around a little bit. Again,
Mm,
trying to be mindful of COVID. But yes, the plan is to move around. I mean, part of taking everything remotely and doing everything remotely is to have the freedom
yeah.
to be where I want to be.
Yeah. And that's your one of your top values, I would imagine.
Yeah, for me, my like one of my top values, and I guess this is where like the traveling comes in.
Yeah.
I call it like exploration and learning.
Mhm.
And for me, that happens when I'm in a new environment. So like,
Yes.
most people like want to move to New York because of the novelty factor of like, oh, like
Mm,
all the cultural elements and like anything that you're interested in, you can find a workshop, a class, a museum, a studio, a center, whatever it is
mhm,
to
mhm.
really foster those interests. But having grown up here, it's like I feel a little tapped out here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think like you don't know what you don't know, right? And I
Yeah.
don't know what's out there.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
for me, I think personally, and I think a lot of people can resonate with this, traveling really helps put things into perspective. Like, I don't think I recognized how capitalistic and results driven and success driven Americans are until I went to places like the Philippines and India and realized that, oh, wait, not everyone thinks this way. Not everyone's like, oh, I gotta work, I gotta be productive. And it's like when you see how other people live, for me personally, I realized there are other ways of living and thriving versus being in this mentality of almost like being stuck in this rat race of like
Mhm.
going, doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I resonate with that so much. That's why it's almost addictive to move around the whole world, to see different perspective, um to absorb all these new knowledge and way of living, because it's just like so much more refreshing. And I remember being in like more poverty stricken places, and they're so happy though. Like they might not need a lot, right? But then they have a
Yes.
community. It's all about connection and love and laughter, and at the end of the day, like that's all we need. And sometimes we forget that when we live in a bubble where consumerism it's at all time high, that we are just so stuck in the matrix, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but once you
So
travel, you're
stuck.
like, wait a second.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's just
you can
other
kind of
ways of,
zoom out and see
for
there's
sure.
more than that. So,
For sure.
yeah, yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so maybe should we do some live coaching
Yeah.
to see what you can, pull out of me, and then for
Yes.
the audience to see
Yes.
what a coaching session looks like, and then the behind the
Yes.
scenes, and that way, they can see if that's something that would be great for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do
All
it.
right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, there are two ways that we can approach this. So the
Yeah.
first is that I know that one thing that you've been thinking about
Mhm.
is wanting to start your own business
Mhm.
and feeling a bit stuck in your beliefs and thoughts that you have
Right.
around that. So that's one thing we can talk about.
Yeah.
The other thing is also like if there's anything that's been on your mind
Mhm.
that you're trying to work through, we can also talk about that. So I will let you take your pick, or we can do
Sure.
both.
Sure. Yeah, they're kind of like related anyways,
Yeah.
because I'm always kind of trying to figure out if I would just take the leap and forget about, flight attendant and, start my own thing, or kind of do both at the same time.
Right.
Now, because right now I'm furloughed, so it would take me another few months, maybe perhaps, I don't know, for me to get back into flying. But the beauty of flying is that it gives me the opportunity to actually be in different places, um, even more conveniently than if I were to start my own thing, because it just ridiculously affordable flights that I get, and I have
Right.
so much time off. But the only drawback of that is very tiring. I might not be flying a lot. Like if we go back to previous schedules, I fly only 10 days a month, and I have like 20 days a month off, right?
Oh,
And that's like already a
yeah.
full-time income, which is amazing, and all the access to the benefits and stuff. Versus, okay, I'm just gonna let it go and maybe live somewhere else in the world. So this is where I kind of like, like, because the thing with being a flight attendant is that I have stability, but also
Mhm.
access. But
Right.
the weakness of that is that I will be tired. Like, how much of that can I
Right.
do? Versus the other option is that I can just literally live in a place a few months at a time, but not knowing how much money will come in, and the discipline of like having to start a business and all of that stuff is completely brand new to me, that
Mhm.
I feel like would be harder. It's not as linear as if I were to pick the flight attendant route, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. All of this makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all of that with me in detail. So the first thing that I want to say is that what you just shared with me, it's so common for us to do that. So what's happening
Mhm.
right now is that everything that you shared with me, it felt like a lot of it came from up here, right? Like, what's the
Mhm.
pro
Mhm.
of this option, what's the pro of that option, what's the con of this, what's the con of that,
Mm.
right? So the first question I want to ask you is like, have you sat down and in silence and like just thought about this like from here? Like, have you taken yourself from down here, like up here to down here?
Um, I have, but because this is a very weak part of my, like, I'm not very good at feelings. Let's just say that I'm way more in the head. So I
Right,
don't even know what comes up. I do, but I don't. Like, almost like I cannot trust it.
right. I
Yeah,
understand. So for
yeah.
I've been there. And I'm still working through it. So for a very long time I operated above my neck. So like just mostly
Mhm,
in here. Um, so the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to like find time when you can be by yourself for
mhm.
yourself and just sit. And of course, thoughts will pop up, right? That's just what happens with us. But that's natural. So there's no need to judge it when the thoughts come up,
Right.
but you sit and you let the thoughts come up. But when they come up, instead of following the thoughts, you just
Mhm,
acknowledge that they come up and then you try to go back to your breath and try to stay within your body, right?
mhm,
So that's the first thing that I would suggest. And when you do this long enough, like things will come to the surface from here. Like
mm,
once you don't latch onto the thoughts, you're able to drop down to here
mm,
and new ways of thinking and ideas will come up versus like the pros, cons, which is what we're
mm.
accustomed to thinking.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I
Okay.
would suggest.
Okay.
Um, in terms of what you shared with me and what I know about you, so there's so much to unpack. And the first thing that I would ask is like, what what are your priorities, right? Because
Mhm,
the first, like you mentioned, okay, if I continue being a flight attendant, I'll have easier access to these different places, right? Which
mhm.
of course is nice. I mean, like who wants to give up like cheap tickets? Like we all love things like that,
Oh,
right?
I can give up. Oh.
But then I also know, from our interactions that one of the things that you care about is staying at a place for a couple months at a time, right? Like,
Mhm.
what matters more to you? Like having easy access where you can stay somewhere for a couple of days and explore, or really situating yourself in a new place and staying there and hunkering down? Like, because they're both
Right.
traveling.
Yeah.
So, what type of traveling is more important to you?
Because the one thing very constant about me is change. I change my mind all the time. So I feel like I can't even answer you this because that would change.
Right.
So I think it depends on what it is. Like,
Mm,
there's nothing that's a priority over the other. That's why I'm struggling so much. It's and it depends if like I want to have a family or not either, right?
mm,
So it's like I don't know if, for example, say unconventional agents is spelled, and then we can create workshops or in personal meetups or whatever.
mhm,
Actually, shorter trips work
mhm.
because I just need to be there a few days, a month or something, and then we'll be good. And I can
Okay.
create like a legacy or whatever it is with unconventional agents. Now, I can also do that obviously with, just quitting it and doing in just being full time. But then there will be a bit more limitations because of money, at least at the
Right.
beginning, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like where it diverge. Um,
Right.
Now, that's in terms of the business side. If I
Mhm,
were to now, I'm very logical again. And then if it comes from just the exploration side, which is the personal uh, preference, uh, I can go either way too. It's kind of like I because I can take a lot of time off from the flying, so I can have like 2 weeks off at a time and just literally travel for 2 weeks,
mhm.
or then stay in one place for 3 months. Like they could both work. So that's
Mm,
why it's really hard for me to prioritize one over the other. And that's
yes.
why I'm just like going back and forth.
Yes. And you know what's beautiful about that?
Yeah.
It means that there's no right or wrong answer,
Mm. Hmm.
right? And if there's no wrong answer, right, then
Right.
anything that you choose is right for you at any
That's
given
true.
moment. So there's
That's
no need
true.
to
I
go
love
back and
that.
forth because like whatever you end up choosing, you're going to be like, oh, there are great things about this. And like, I'm okay with
Yeah.
your option, right?
Oh, I
So
love
that's
that.
the
That's true.
first thing.
That's true.
The second thing is that um, this is where clarity is really helpful, right? So you had mentioned that one of the benefits of being a flight attendant is, if my thing is that I want to run workshops with unconventional Asians, then being a flight attendant would be helpful so I can come back to home base and run these workshops, right? So my question for you is, what is the end goal? Right? Because the end goal, I imagine, isn't workshops. That's probably just a means to like something bigger, the legacy that you talked about that you want to create, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so what is that that you want to do and accomplish, and then work backwards from there to figure out like what are the steps and the means for you to get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, it's really a community that gets people together, uh, so they can like force your own path, right? So the kind of the message for the brand, but it can be by the means of workshops, seminars, books, courses, and things like that. So I guess that is the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like maybe retreats or whatever in other parts of the world. But yeah, that's kind of the end goal.
Okay.
Um, so there would be traveling involved in a part at the time, because I won't be running retreat all year long. There might be one or
Right.
two or three or whatever. Workshops can be maybe once a month or something, like if it's in person, or now it could be online. So yeah, that's kind of like what I'm looking at. I can
Yeah.
foresee so far, at least.
Yeah. So from what you just shared with me, like the first question that pops up is like, of the things that you had mentioned seminars, workshops, retreats, and I think like books, right?
Right.
So it's like the big question is, of all the ideas that you have, like what is the idea that you want to focus on to
Mm,
monetize your
right.
business, right? Otherwise, what ends up happening is that we can just be an octopus and then have like
I
our
know.
tentacles like dipped in 8 different pots, but like not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
getting anywhere because
Yeah. Yeah.
our energy is so scattered. So it's like
Mm,
of the things that you mentioned, what is most feasible, what is most realistic, because I love the mission of fostering community to uplift each other so that people can live authentically, right? Like that
mhm,
is so
mhm.
beautiful, and that's what you're doing now, right? However, if this is what you want to do in the long run, sustainably, financially for yourself, and to continue giving to people, it's like the question becomes like, how do you monetize this, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
what are the ideas that you have, and how can you rank those ideas in terms of what makes most sense versus like having this idea, having that idea? Because the thing
Right.
is, when you have all these ideas, like you're being pulled in different directions, and then it's hard to make a decision because
That's
you're
the
like,
thing.
well, this is possible, that's possible, but what is possible and makes most sense for
Mm,
the trajectory that you want unconventional Asians to go on?
mhm, mhm. I think workshops would be the most. It makes the most sense, because I want results, like for people too, and community means that people have to work together, and then they can practice with each other. And
Mhm.
that to me, it's so important, because like we can read books all day long, but if we don't actually integrate the knowledge that we learn, um, it's not really useful. So I feel like, the workshop would combine the component of community, and practice, and getting people together, and the connections, and that to me is beautiful. So I think that would be one thing I would focus on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So now it's like it's about running with that idea and like
Mm,
flushing out the details. Like, how
right.
would that work? Like, what would that require of me? Both like, do I need to be in a physical location? Like, how much
Mhm.
energy do I think I need to expend, like coming up with workshop materials or
Right.
marketing or bringing people in? Like, is this something that I can do whilst being a flight attendant? Like, do I
Mhm.
understand my body enough to know,
Mm,
like, how will I feel energy wise, you know?
Right,
So
right.
it's like, that's why it's important to like hone in on something so that
Mm,
you can actually understand like realistically, like how can I actually implement this? Is this feasible? Otherwise,
right,
it's very conceptual in here, right
right,
up here.
right, right. And yeah, it's not very realistic if I don't see the details. I
Yes.
see what you mean. Okay, that's a really good point. Okay, that's interesting because I guess then for the next few months, because most likely I still have time, then it's to focus on getting those details out and then taking action. And
Mm-hmm.
then I can even test to see if I can do both at the same time because nobody says I have to just jump in one or the other.
Yes.
I can just see if I could do it simultaneously because I actually don't know the answer yet. Um,
Yes.
instead of like just speculating how I will feel, how will I actually do it?
Yes.
and and if my body really can't take it, then I will know uh, the right decision for me. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a really good point.
Yes, because so the thing that I like that comes to mind is, you know how you hear those stories of mothers who like unfortunately like their baby's like stuck under a truck, and in that
Oh
moment
yeah,
they're able to like
yeah,
muster Herculean strength and just like push the truck aside and like lift their baby into safety, right? So I use that as an example because sometimes when we find ourselves in situations that really test our determination, our resolve, our strength. Like
mm,
there's something that we tap into that we're not even aware of is
right.
available to us until we're in that moment. So there's
Yes.
a part of me that wonders, like, you know, if you were in a situation where you're working full time for the airline, right? And you're
Mhm.
trying to build up unconventional Asians in a way where you can monetize, it's like maybe you'll reach that point where that situation will test your commitment and you can see like what you're actually capable of producing in like mind,
Mm,
body, and spirit, right?
right.
That is hard to see now when you're just trying to speculate as to like what that could be.
I love that. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's really just taking actions in order to get feedback, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Iterating. That's what startups do, right? They're
Yeah.
just constantly iterating and improving and seeing what works, what doesn't
Mm,
work, and just taking it one step at a time.
I love that. Yeah, because I think there's a deep programming in terms of like fear of failure. And then it's like if I don't plan this perfectly or if I fail, then maybe there's this underlying like I don't know unworthiness or something that will disappoint other people and myself, and like how could I live with that, type of thing. So yeah, but like just to kind of reframe that to know that I won't really get the right feedback until I actually take the action really changes the whole narrative.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you know, based on what you just shared, may I ask you,
Mhm.
what does failure mean to you?
Yeah. Failure means that I don't do it perfectly. But what is perfection? Now I'm like asking myself deeper questions. Um, Perfection. Okay, this is interesting because for me, I define perfection not so much as the quality of the product, but as in how much effort I put in. So
Mm,
I was in the military before, and I almost like use that as a benchmark in how effort should be exerted. If I'm not throwing up, if I'm not like, you know, like mentally exhausted, it's not good enough. Like it's almost like
with
that.
you.
Yeah, yeah. That's like the mental, I guess, beating myself up type of narrative I have in my own
Yeah,
mind because it's like, no, you can do better than this. It's always like I'm
yeah,
being militant to myself.
yeah,
That kind of worked against my favor. And I realized subconsciously I do that to myself all the time. But because I'm afraid to be disciplined by military personnel and a sergeant, then I like procrastinate. Then I
mm,
get stuck in a place of like in my head beating myself up and then not doing the
right.
work. So
Right,
it's
because
like
you're like, oh, if this can't be perfect, then I might as well not do it. So I don't have
exactly,
to like beat myself up because it's
yeah,
not going to be perfect. Oh, that's
exactly.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, I
And then I procrastinate, but I can't even fully enjoy the procrastination because I inside my head I'm still beating myself up.
right,
So
right.
it's like then I never win.
Yeah. So, okay, so a couple of things to say about that. Um, the first is that I think that again, this is where like the time to be with yourself for yourself is so
Mhm,
important. And what I would encourage you to do in this instance is to sit with yourself, and it could be, in meditation, or if you
mhm,
journal, or if you like drinking tea or coffee, just like
mhm,
be in the present moment
mm.
and think about your experience. First of all, I didn't know you served in the military, so that's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, just the
Yeah,
1 year. I was just, yeah, training in Canada.
that's awesome. So think about your experiences in the military, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And feel grateful for those experiences because they have shaped who you are, right? Like I'm sure
Yeah.
you learned things along the way. I'm sure it gave you discipline. I'm sure it made you very detail oriented, right? And
Mhm.
so there are things that you took away from that experience, even if it's made you very like militant towards yourself, right?
Uh-huh.
So the second part of this experience of being with yourself is to recognize that what once served you in your life no longer serves you,
Mm,
and you don't need that anymore.
right.
Like, be grateful for that experience. Thank the military, thank yourself for having gone through that experience, and then let it go. Like, I
Right.
know it's sometimes easier said than done,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's like if you keep holding on to that,
Mhm.
what's going to end up happening is that you can't go after the mission that you care so much about because you're
Right.
caught in this endless cycle. And let's say you break out of the cycle, right? Um, and you start taking action. It's like even as you're taking action, it's like if your cup is not full, like how can you
Right.
fully give to other people? Because you're
Mhm.
going to be so mentally and emotionally exhausted from that internal conversation that you're
Yeah,
having, right?
right.
So it's like I mean, this is the airplane analogy, which is perfect because you're a flight attendant. It's like you have to first put the mask on yourself
Yeah.
before you can put the mask on someone else, right?
Mhm,
So it's
mhm.
like if you're thinking about like the perfection and how like it's not good enough, then like how are you going to serve the people, right? Which is like
Right.
another way of looking at it, right? So it's not so much about like how much effort you put in or that it has to be a struggle. Like ultimately what you want to do is serve the people so that they can live
Mhm.
more authentically and courageously,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
if you put that in the forefront of your mind, then everything else about it not being good enough, it not you not struggling enough, it not being hard enough, like that will be secondary to what is most important
Mm,
to you. So it's like your why gets
mm,
to stay in the forefront of your mind as you're doing these things, and the
yeah,
stuff that you're afraid of will fall to the back,
mm,
will take second priority.
yeah, yeah. No, I really like that. Yeah, because I think what is pulling me forward, it's knowing that I'm doing it for other people, not for myself. Yeah, and that helps a lot for sure. Because it's like if it's just up to me, I wouldn't I wouldn't do it. But it's because I'm like, obliged to other people that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get it done, right? So
Yeah.
for sure that's definitely helping. But at the same time, kind of like really giving myself compassion in the moment and knowing that I've tried and that's good enough. It's very important because I realize my inner critic is extremely loud. Right.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I think we can all relate to that. And, speaking of inner critic, one thing that I find helpful is to give your inner critic a name
Mm,
so that you can learn to disassociate with your inner critic, right?
I love
So
that.
it's like when a thought pops up, you can remind yourself, like, this is not coming from me, it's coming
Right.
from my inner critic.
Oh, I
So
love
I'm
that.
just aware of this inner critic. My inner critic is Corella. So I'm just aware of Corella
Oh,
spewing these thoughts, but they're not actually my true thoughts.
Ah, I love that. Okay, I already have a name. I don't know why. Her name is Lucy. She just came to me like, all right, Lucy, shut up.
Yes, yes. There you go. Yeah, like thank you,
Yeah,
Lucy,
yeah.
for sharing that. And I'm just gonna ignore, like, I hear
Yeah,
you
yeah,
and
just
I'm
gonna
not gonna
ignore you.
run with it.
I love that. Yeah, I really like personifying the different parts of ourselves and kind of calling her out. Yeah, it makes it actually more fun
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Then you don't like take
disassociate.
yourself so seriously,
Right, right.
because
I love
we
that.
all do that. We think like um we think we think all these things, right? And it
Mhm,
becomes like so serious, and it's
mhm,
like
mhm.
we had talked about earlier, that we all go through this,
Yeah.
right? Like we all have variations of this, and it's not so serious because we're all just trying to be the best versions of ourselves, right? But let's make it fun along the way. Like
Yeah.
things don't have to be difficult. And I know that
Mm,
there's a lot of conditioning around that because I personally have worked through that too. It's like there's this feeling of like if I'm not struggling, if I'm not putting in all my time doing something, then maybe I don't deserve the outcome.
yes,
Right? So I need to be
yes.
doing all the
Yeah.
time. I need to be producing all the time.
Yeah.
But again, the purpose of life is to be happy, right? So if it's like you're
Mhm.
not enjoying what you're doing in the process, like why do we put ourselves through that? Why do we put
Mm.
ourselves through the internal conversations of I'm not doing enough, I need to do more? Like that just leads to burnout.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Like now to see the end goal as happiness, not as a certain outcome, really changes the game. It's kind of
Yes,
like, well, yeah, I'm doing all these things, but am I having fun though? Because that's
yes,
derailing from the happiness part. Then you can kind of like get back into alignment.
yes.
Mm,
And it takes practice because even though we have this self-awareness, for the
mm,
most part, we operate within a society that doesn't
mm,
value that or put
yeah,
that first, right? Like we are very results and
yeah.
yeah, like results driven, output
Mhm, mhm.
driven. So it's constantly um overriding that and doing what
Mm,
feels right to us, right? So
right.
it's basically dismantling the conditioning
Yeah.
and doing what serves us as the noise continues around us.
That's why it's so difficult to really truly stay in your lane because the society is still reinforcing that, I guess, more traditional narrative. That's why it's so important for more of us to do the work when we can tip the scale and
Yes,
be the majority and be like, wait a second, let's change that definition to success equals happiness, not success equals output or
yeah,
whatever materialistic things that we want or status or any. Yeah.
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 And I think that, this year, because of the pandemic, I do think that people are thinking
Mhm,
about like
mhm,
what's important to me? Like, what do I want my life to be about? Because now I mean, one thing for a long while, the usual forms of entertainment we turn to avoid turning inward were not available to us, right? So it's
mhm.
almost like forced people to
Yeah.
think about like, what do I care about? What do I want my life to be about? Like the world is, I mean, look at the world, like it's in such a disarray. So like, what do I want to do?
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
so I think that there is collectively, I'd like to think that people are thinking about these things more so than ever.
Yes, and I'm excited for what will be on the other side as the world opens up again. I think when people are just more mindful with their life and with the people around them, it can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. It was like such a great
Yeah.
coaching session because it's like really helping me question myself to go a little deeper into how I define different things and just being able to kind of reframe and seeing it from another perspective really helps. So I hope the audience can find value in that as well. And so, where can the audience find you?
Yeah. So I am at www.angelachoi, my name, .co. And on my website, if you guys are thinking about what it means to live your purpose, I have a free guide called Six Steps to Living Your Purpose, and you can find that on my website. And you'll go through a series of exercises to help you align with your purpose and to figure out what matters to you. So
Oh,
that's where people can find
amazing.
me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great because so many people are asking that question. So this is going to be so useful. And are you using Facebook, Instagram as well?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram as well. So Instagram.com/AngelaChoi.co.
Okay, that's easy. So your website and your Instagram is the same. Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Facebook's the same too. So
Oh,
you
okay,
can find me
perfect.
on Facebook as well.
Okay.
And I love hearing from people. So feel free to reach out if you're watching this at a later time. I love helping people. I love hearing from people. So yeah, let's connect.
Yeah, for sure. We need more leaders like you to help the world and to see their purpose, and so that way we can all live happier lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you again, Angela, and everybody who's
Yeah.
watching. And please feel free to type in the comments below if you have any questions at all. If you're watching the replay, we're more than happy to answer you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, guys, and
Thank you
have
for
a great
having me.
weekend. Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.